President Trump is pressuring the European Union to impose 100% tariffs on China and India over their purchases of Russian oil. This is all in an effort to bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table and end the war in Ukraine. The EU, one of China's top trading partners, behind the United States, over $850 billion in goods traded, compared to $140 billion with India and nearly $80 billion with Russia. President Trump says he will be meeting with India's Prime Minister Modi on trade in the coming weeks. Let's bring in Gatestone Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, great to see you once again. We talked about this on Monday with you and the fact that you've got this, axis of evil, but it's also coming down to the energy needs of India and their purchases of Russian energy, which still, now it's Thursday, they still have not signaled that they're going to stop doing.
Yes, and China continues to purchase Russian oil in large quantities. I think President Trump has lost patience with Vladimir Putin. Trump tried to accommodate Putin, gave him an off-ramp, and Putin hasn't taken it. And also, we saw early yesterday morning, Russia sent 19 drones into Polish airspace. And this is getting extremely serious. This is 1939, Cheryl. Poland has invoked Article 4 of the NATO treaty that's demanding consultations. That's one step away from Article 5. Article 5 is essentially war with the Russian Federation. So we are at the doorstep of catastrophe right now. And, I don't know where this goes, but I do hope that we start to impose those costs on Putin and on Xi Jinping to show them that we mean business. Because if we don't do that, they are going to continue to run against us. And
it goes back to the issue of this alliance between these leaders, and many say that that was a message that was being sent to the United States. Nobody would have been happier about that message than Vladimir Putin, to be clear. But there's a piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning that says East is East, fears of the India-China-Russia alliance overblown. But, you have commentators, one on CNN, saying that those pictures of those leaders should send a chill down the spine of every American. Are these concerns overblown?
No, they're not. I mean, we have heard for a decade from the smart people in New York and Washington that Russia and China would never get together. And, they point out, well, these two countries have been historical adversaries, and that's absolutely true. And yes, their partnership of today probably won't last for 3 or 4 decades, but that's not what's important. What's important, Cheryl, is what Russia and China are doing right now. And right now, they're coordinating their policies. They're assaulting us. It's because they see the world in the same terms, and they view the United States as an enemy, and they can see that we are not willing to take adequate measures to protect ourselves, our friends, and our allies. And they view that as being feeble. Now, I believe that they're wrong, but that's the way they view things. And that's important because that determines the way they act.
I've got Marcus Lemonis on the set with me. He's got a question for you, Gordon. Go ahead.
Well, when I think about where the real risk is really around energy and what that's going to cause the U.S. to continue to ask the EU to do with tariffs. We know there's a difference between tariffs and sanctions. How do you see those two things playing out? Are there going to be sanctions, or are we going to keep playing this tariff game?
We got to do more than just the tariffs, Marcus. We have got to cut off the flow of money to Russia, because if there's no money for Russia, there's no war in Ukraine. And we have taken steps in that direction with sanctions, but we don't enforce them with the vigor that is absolutely necessary. And of course, the sanctions aren't as strict as they need to be in the first place.
Well, Gordon,
so tariffs are part of a package, but we need to go further.
When you say further, right, so we're talking about monetary policy. Cutting off the money to Russia is really about taking out the energy problem that's there. So when you say further, what does further mean to you?
It means that we have to make sure that neither the United States nor Europe nor our friends and partners around the world do any business with Russia.
All right. Well, obviously, if you look at the moves that China has made, what's interesting, and this just broke yesterday, Gordon, we found out that these lawmakers in Washington from the House Armed Services Committee there's a report they're planning a trip to China later this month, led by the way, a Democrat. I mean, this is just 1 week after we saw that visit between Modi and Putin and Xi Jinping. President Trump also potentially visiting South Korea next month. He could meet with Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC summit, Gordon. So what do you expect? And what do you think I'm not sure I understand what these lawmakers think they're going to do with China, because China doesn't seem to respond, from what I've seen, to dialogue. They respond to pressure and to threats.
Yes. I mean, we're Americans, so we think that we can talk everybody into seeing the world the way we do. But for decades, we've talked to China, and we have tried to convince them that they should calculate their interests the way we see it. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And the problem here is that sometimes talking makes things worse. It makes it worse because the Chinese know what they're doing. They know that we're upset about it, and yet they see that we are not willing to use American power to coerce them. And so they believe that either we're feeble or that we're finished as a world power, which is what Xi Jinping has actually been telling people. So really at the point we need to say, look, yes, we've done with talking because this is only aggravating a situation. I know this is a message that people in democracies don't want to hear, but unfortunately, we're at 1939, and we have actually got to get to the point where we use our power to protect ourselves. It's just simple as that. And by the way, Cheryl, today is the 24th anniversary of 9/11. 9/11 occurred because we were unwilling to listen to what Osama bin Laden was saying about the United States, even after he killed 6 Americans in 1993 with the bombing of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. So we have a problem with enemy identification. And this time our enemies have weapons that pose existential threats to the United States, unlike Osama bin Laden, unlike what happened in the 1930s.
Okay, Gordon, I want you to stand by here for just a second. New York City Mayor Eric Adams attending billionaire John Catsimatidis' 77th birthday party in New York over the weekend, just hours after Adams vowed to stay in the mayor's race. Watch.
I respect the opinions of others. They can have their opinions, but the fact of the matter, the voters decide who are the next mayor of the city of New York. It's the voters. Just because people yell at you and call you names, and just because a number of people ask you to step down or don't do what you believe you're supposed to do, you're supposed to succumb to that? That's not what I do. I'm a fighter. I fight for the people of the city of New York. Just because the loudest are saying something, you may consider that pressure. I don't consider that pressure.
Catsimatidis says that President Trump told him he's setting a deadline for the candidates drop out of the race by this week to make it a one-on-one competition to counter Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani. Joining me now, the chairman and CEO of United Refining Company, Red Apple Group, Christie's, and D'Agostino Supermarkets, John Catsimatidis, a good friend of our program. So Adams comes out and responds to the reports that President Trump had offered him the ambassadorship to Saudi Arabia, but vows to stay in the race. Your reaction?
I am not sure he was offered the ambassadorship to Saudi Arabia, but President Trump has said that he prefers to have one-on-one against Mamdani because it'll be more fair. And I think on one-on-one Mamdani, whether it's Andrew Cuomo, I think wins 70-30. 60-40, or whether it's Eric Adams, he'll win. But Curtis, look, I've been running a campaign of anybody but Mamdani. And I think that's very important. The fact is, and the people and the citizens of the United States and the citizens of New York have to know this. This Mamdani character is a created character. And I believe everybody in our federal government knows it, and the investigative part of our federal government knows it. And the fact is that in June, July, he had 1% of the vote. All of a sudden, $50 million shows up to hire an army worth of people to go out and promote him. That is a lot of money. I mean, it smells. I mean, a lot of it came, according to the New York Post, it was the Soros people. It was another person from Singapore that's getting Chinese money. Another report said the New York Post was Qatar because they're funding his mother. But this is a created character. And if they, the Department of Justice or whoever, can create the proof that he knew there was foreign money helping him, that is he should be knocked out of the race. So you have a plan A and you have a plan B. And that's the way it is. Anybody but Zoram, Curtis, Eric Adams, or Cuomo would all be acceptable mayors.
But if you look at the polling, John, to be clear, that it is Mamdani and then it is Cuomo, and then down at the bottom is Sliwa and Adams. In fact, Adams is in last place. And so I think many in New York were surprised on Friday night when he said he was staying in the race. Do you think that Eric Adams leaves the race?
There's always a possibility. I don't know. I haven't been in the negotiations, or if there have been negotiations. Look, he is capable of being mayor. You know what I said to Tom Homan? Because I love New York? Put an ICE agent at every polling booth. I mean, if you put an ICE agent at every polling booth, every election booth, maybe things will be fairer and things will pass the smell test at that point.
If it came down to a one-on-one race between, say, Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, would you back Andrew Cuomo?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you about this. So Governor Kathy Hochul was on Fox News Sunday yesterday. She has not endorsed Mamdani. Jeffries has not endorsed. Schumer has not endorsed. The question is why? Watch this.
There's been so much speculation about what I'm going to do. I think the bigger question is what the voters of New York want to do. I vote in Buffalo, New York, just for the record. I'm not in New York City. I'm here part-time. But listen, it is up to the voters, and there should not be outside influences on this decision from the White House on down. Let the voters of New York decide. The next mayor is going to have to work with me because it's hard to acknowledge when you're the mayor of New York, but the state of New York has enormous power over decisions in the city, and particularly the financial side of it. So stay tuned. We'll see what happens.
Which is true, but at the same time, listen to what she said, outside forces. Now Mamdani is saying President Trump should debate me, which is ridiculous. It would never happen. But this is their strategy, John.
Well, Kathy Hochul, Governor Hochul, was at my Saturday morning breakfast that we have in Southampton with Father Alex. And she says that New York City, she said it, New York City is a capitalist city, and she believes in capitalism, and she's not going to endorse Mamdani.
She's not going to endorse him at all.
I spoke to Senator Schumer last night. I don't think he's going to endorse Mamdani. I think they're looking at the fact that it's going to hurt the Democratic Party overall, and the Democrats could lose 49 states in 2026 if it looks like the Socialist Party has taken over the Democratic Party, which that's what it looks like. The Socialist Party has taken over the Democratic Party, and the common sense Democrats, the Governor Pattersons of the world, common sense Democrats have to put their foot down and take it back.
Before you go, I do want to ask you very quick. Again, when it comes to Zoran Mamdani, Bernie Sanders was here in the city with him over the weekend. AOC was there over the weekend. Those voters are a progressive, important bloc in New York City. What is the Bernie Sanders AOC effect in your mind?
Bernie Sanders has, I think the extreme left wing, the socialists, 15-20% of the vote. But the common sense Democrats, like I said, have to have the courage to stand up.
John Catsimatidis, you are a very important voice in the mayor's race for New York City. We have less than 2 months to go. Please come back, sir.
Thank you.
It's always great to speak with you, John Catsimatidis.
With great pleasure, joining us as U.S. Treasury Secretary, Mr. Scott Bessent. Treasury Secretary, thank you very much. Can you fix this? Can you and E.J. Antoni, can you get E.J. in there to fix the Bureau of Labor Statistics before any more damage is done?
Well, Larry, good to be with you. And it's a real problem. As you said, if the Fed says they're data dependent and the data has been atrocious, then it seems like there's probably some makeup cuts in order here, or the size of this month's cut needs to be recalibrated. And sure, it can be fixed. Anything can be fixed. You just have to first, we had to establish that it was broken, which President Trump did. Now we have to go about fixing it. And it wasn't working well before, that kind of this lazy notion that they had dropped down to these low response rates, 30, 40% response rates, and they intuited the balance. Intuiting the balance is going from quantitative to qualitative. We need good empirical data, and it's not easy to get to, but you got to want to get there, and we want to get there. I think EJ is a great person to do it. I've known him for years. He's high integrity, data-driven, the ruthless truth pursuer.
Secretary, you mentioned recalibrate this month's meeting. It's an interesting point. Maybe they should go a half a point. And a lot of people think, very distinguished people think, that we ought to be at 3% Fed funds rate by the end of the year. We're at 4.5% now. Seems to me they're going to have to make some larger moves, in light of these numbers. But also, you've got market conditions, as I said. Dr. Copper's gone nowhere. Lumber prices are coming down. The curve is still inverted, things of that sort. Maybe the Fed will recalibrate. Maybe they should.
Well, they should. Let's see if they will. As John Maynard Keynes famously said, "Sir, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do?" And it turns out that we didn't have good facts.
Yes, right. Absolutely. So let me ask you about Fed membership. First of all, Steve Myron, CEA chair, taking a leave of absence, going to the Fed. Do you think the Republican Senate can get him at the FOMC meeting in 10 days? Is there enough time?
I do. I think he could be voted on as soon as the 10th. So.
All right, as soon as the 10th. Now, second one, maybe a tougher nut to crack. President Trump has fired Lisa Cook. He has fired her. For allegations of mortgage fraud, primary residence, and so forth. But for him, he's the executive. He's the commander-in-chief. It's he who determines cause. He has fired her. What happens here? Will the administration nominate somebody to take her place? Or is there a way to keep her from being in the next FOMC meeting that we just talked about? After all, if she's fired, she shouldn't be voting on monetary policy, which she couldn't figure out on her own mortgage application. What happens to Lisa Cook?
Well, Larry, first of all, Dr. Cook hasn't said she didn't do it. She hasn't said she didn't do it. She keeps talking process, not facts. So what we've seen is that she's saying, she and her attorney have gone to court and said that President Trump doesn't have the right to fire her for cause, and clearly there is cause here. And as with so many of President Trump's policies, we've seen these activist courts get in the way. They slow down the process, but eventually, if this has to go on an expedited basis to the Supreme Court, President Trump is winning victory after victory. That the Democrats at large, the establishment in general, have decided that the only way to stop President Trump is through the courts, through these regional courts, and that's proving very unsatisfactory because eventually they get overruled.
Well, what's interesting here, Scott, is that the Fed, look, the Supreme Court just stayed a lower court and has now kept a Federal Trade Commission commissioner out. I mean, that person is essentially no longer an FTC commissioner. So I just wonder, that may be applicable. The Supreme Court took that move. Maybe that's going to be applicable to the Lisa Cook situation. I mean, if the president fires her, she should get her stuff out of the building. She's gone. And no FOMC meeting for her.
Well, again, Larry, I've also been disappointed, and I've encouraged Chair Powell to do an internal investigation. We saw several governors leave for trading violations in the past few years, and the Fed did a very fulsome investigation of that. I am not sure why they're not doing an internal investigation here.
Secretary, you wrote, let's see, it came out last weekend, your latest op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal, And you basically called now for a top-to-bottom review of all of Federal Reserve operations, monetary policy, regulatory policy, staffing, regional reserve banks, and the like. Tell us about that, because this sounds like a blueprint for a new Trump-oriented Federal Reserve Board.
It's not a blueprint for a new Trump-oriented Federal Reserve Board, Larry. It is a blueprint for a Fed that values its independence and monetary policy. Because of this gain of function, monetary policy and mission creep and bloat that the Fed has had, they are risking their monetary policy. That, I believe that the Fed should be able to set monetary policy on an independent basis, but the more creep we see within their mission, then the more it threatens their independence. And look, they covered themselves in glory in this decade. We had the worst inflation of 40 or 50 years. We never saw a post-examination of why things went wrong, how we could keep it from happening again. Regulatory policies, we saw the Silicon Valley Bank and the other two banks that went under, we saw that get swept under the rug. And the independence of the Fed exists because they have a special relationship with the American public. They get to be appointed without budget constraints because the American people believe that they are above reproach. And again and again, drifting away from the central mission has just caused so many problems. That editorial is part of a much longer 15-page piece in a magazine online called The International Economy. And I'd urge everyone to go and read that. Because the other thing that this Fed has done through these massive QE interventions and balance sheet growth is they've caused these wide disparities across different groups in the economies. That if you had assets, you've done great. If you didn't have assets, you've gotten crushed.
Interestingly, that's such an important point. A lot of people haven't benefited from that. We're seeing polling evidence and maybe some election evidence that the youth vote that Mr. Trump carried so well. Nonetheless, the Gen Zers are moving away from the Republican Party because of an affordability problem. I mean, in a way, the jobs that disappeared, and I think there's a 10.5% unemployment rate for youth. That's a problem. That's a Gen Z problem that may be a larger problem. So it's time for the Fed to do what, Mr. Secretary? That's really the big question. If you're going to replace the Fed's management, and Jay Powell's going to be gone next spring, what do they replace it with?
They replace it with an open mind and a willingness to look at what's going wrong. What went wrong with the great inflation? What are we doing wrong? Why do we, their standard GDP estimate is 1.8%, and the forecast error has been 0.6, 0.7. Larry, you and I were both in the private sector in the economic modeling business, and you'd be fired for errors. If you had 30, 40% errors. And again, the other thing too is, why is it that the errors occur on the upside during Democrat administrations and on the downside during Republican administrations?
Yeah. That's a very good question. Two more quick ones. I know you're a busy chap. Number one, how about my King Dollar? I didn't see any mention of King Dollar in your op-ed piece. I know you didn't forget it. You must be saving it for something, Mr. Secretary.
Well, Larry, I have a very busy day, and with President Trump, most of the night job. As no one knows better than you after the first term. But I plan on getting something about the dollar, U.S. dollar dominance, and how we're going to keep that out in the coming quarters.
Yes. All right. Well, listen, a great country needs a great currency. Last one is this business about IEEPA, which is now being held up in the courts. Worst case, you might have to refund $400 billion worth of tariffs. I don't know how the heck you do that in any orderly fashion. And after all, isn't trade policy part and parcel of foreign policy, and foreign policy is left up to the president. He is the commander-in-chief. I don't see how these lower courts can prevent the president from using IEEPA, International Economic Emergency. He needs urgency and speed to rebalance the federal trading, the world trading system, which has been broken for years. What are you thinking about IEEPA? And if the Supreme Court goes against you, do you have a fallback for IEEPA?
Larry, I'm confident the Supreme Court's going to go with us, and let's divide the tariffs into two categories that the president has used his emergency powers on. One is the fentanyl tariffs. And if this fentanyl epidemic in the U.S. that's costing 200,000, causing 200,000 deaths a year, and then ruining people's lives, several hundred thousand on top of that, and that's coming across the borders, then I don't know what the president has authority to use if it's not for this fentanyl emergency. The second is with the reciprocal tariffs to bring down these massive trade deficits. As you and I know, in economics and markets, there's something called a tipping point, and my judgment, that as someone who's taught economic history, is that we were very close to the tipping point, and the emergency nature of it is we're close to the waterfall, and President Trump has taken us away from the edge. We're going back upstream to a safer place. We're going to move into balance. We've secured incredible trade deals for the American people to bring back manufacturing. And Larry, what's going unnoticed in these trade deals too is the other side. We put on 15, 20, 25% tariffs, and we're collecting substantial revenue. But the other way to get to balance is to make the other countries take down their tariffs on us, non-tariff barriers, subsidies, and U.S. companies are benefiting from that on their exports. I would expect to see a big increase in export due to the other side of the equation, which nobody talks about. And yes, we do have a fallback position. It's more cumbersome, and I think it limits the president's hands to do these great deals. We've got the Chinese who are willing to put in $550 billion in direct investment into the U.S. Koreans, a very large amount. And these trade deals are astounding. They're bringing in trillions and trillions of dollars. And what a shame, what a tragedy it would be to be overruled on this. But this is the president's signature policy. First he solved the border, now he's solving trade. And I think courts are very reluctant to overrule a president's signature policy.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And as I said, trade policy is part and parcel of foreign policy. Foreign policy is the domain of the commander-in-chief. Supreme Court shouldn't get in the way of that either. Anyway, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, thanks very much for your time. Good luck. Good,
Larry. Good to see him.
The Biden auto pen controversy taking a new turn. Axios is reporting senior Biden officials repeatedly questioned the decision-making behind the former president's questionable pardons and use of the auto pen to sign crucial measures. Maria spoke with House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer on this program last week about the legitimacy of these pardons. Watch.
Are you saying that there is a chance that those documents, whether it's an executive order which hits policy and impacts American people, or whether it's the pardons, are they not legitimate?
I haven't seen anything that would suggest that they were. I think they're in peril right now. These last three witnesses that we're bringing in for transcribed interviews, they better produce some hard evidence to make everyone on the Oversight Committee think that Joe Biden knew exactly what was going on, or else I think that all the pardons and executive orders, especially the ones during the last 4 or 5 months of the Biden administration, I think they're all in peril.
So then it could be that the pardoning of, for example, Dr. Anthony Fauci is not legitimate.
Exactly. That's correct.
Joining me now is Missouri Congressman Mark Alford. Congressman, according to Pew Research, Biden granted clemency to over 4,000 people. To be clear, 4,245, that is a record. More than any other president in U.S. history. 95% of those We're in the final 3.5 months of the presidency, Congressman, and some of these pardons, just to lay this out specifically, Maria mentioned policy decisions. Energy policy is one thing, but one official at the DOJ, this is Liz Oyer, she said, especially when it came to these death row inmates, she was told not to contact the victims' families. Basically, do your job, shut up, and don't complain, is what these DOJ officials are now coming out and saying about this whole thing.
Well, Cheryl, I think this is a great disservice to the victims of these crimes, these heinous acts of violence that were perpetrated on these poor victims. And now the people who committed these crimes go scot-free, basically. This auto pen controversy, the auto pen chaos, I think will go down in American history as one of the biggest disservices that the Biden administration perpetrated on the American people and the justice system. It is unconscionable for the President of the United States to basically not know what other people were doing and using an auto pen and using his authority as the chief executive of the United States of America to let people out of prison and to pardon people, including his son, in advance of future prosecution. I think it is shameful, and I applaud Chairman Comer for getting to the bottom of this, and I think you're going to see some big things coming in the next couple of weeks.
And this is why the work of Comer is so important, Chairman Comer, because, it was really, you mentioned that Hunter pardon, that was December 1st of 2024. After that, apparently that's when there was this mass scramble to identify all these other individuals that they could pardon before President Biden left office. And I will say another DOJ official did resign in protest over this at the time. So we're looking for more, obviously, from that committee. I want to ask you about this as well. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has revealed that the Trump administration may declare a national housing emergency this fall. This would address high prices and limited inventory. Now, Bessent says interest rate cuts would be helpful, but the administration could also take some other steps to alleviate certain costs, Congressman. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, look, I had the Real Estate Caucus, a former realtor. We have more than 120 members. It's a bipartisan caucus, and we are delving into this. We're about to actually file a rather large bill regarding this measure and hoping to work with the White House on this as well to get their support. But there are things that are prohibiting people from achieving the American dream. For years, our parents and grandparents thought that home ownership was the basis for that American dream. And I feel that way as well. Building equity as you build your life and have something to leave to your children, some sort of inheritance to fall back on when you get older, to take equity out of that home. Our young people now are not really interested so much in buying a home as they are in having experiences and travel, which is good, but there's something to be said about home ownership, and there are some big things standing in the way. Insurance, down payment, making the monthly payment. It's just out of reach for too many people, and the prices of homes have gone up dramatically in cities like Kansas City because they've adopted the Green New Scam ordinances that have gone out through the Inflation Reduction Act. And those building codes have added about 30% to the cost of a house and making it even more unachievable for young people.
So that's the regulation that you're talking about. So does that come from, say, if you're talking about new builds, is that something that EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin needs to tackle? I mean, what agency would be best to handle this? Or does it all go through HUD? And the other thing you mentioned, which I think is important, is it's a lot of these local, city regulations and state regulations. A lot of states are going to push back, obviously, on being interfered with by the federal government. Do you foresee that, playing out?
Well, look, I'm a strong believer in the more government is local, the better. But these regulations that were overburdening and still are overburdening in some areas, these cities chose to adopt these. It wasn't something that was really forced upon them. They chose to adopt these, and it's hurting the building markets in Kansas City and other parts. We have seen it firsthand, and we've got to make sure that some of those are rolled back so that builders can do their job. Supply is a huge issue right now. The supply isn't there. The interest rates need to come down. We need to take a look at how do we bring insurance rates down. It's several factors that are playing into this, but if we don't get this fixed now, we're going to be in trouble in the next 10 to 15 years.
Okay. Before you go, I do want to ask you about the business at hand in Washington right now. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is signaling bipartisan talks still have a long way to go to prevent that government shutdown. There is just 9 legislative days left to prevent one. Watch this.
Republicans can continue to go at it alone. They can continue to bow down to Donald Trump. They can continue to surrender Congress's constitutional powers over the executive and enable Donald Trump and his evil minion, Russell Vogt, as they illegally cancel and steal congressional-approved funding. And we Democrats will not accept that. We won't bail Republicans out as the cost of health care, groceries, school supplies, rent, electricity, automobiles all go up and up and up. We Democrats don't want to see a government shutdown. But avoiding one means Republicans have to show they are serious about having real, substantive, serious negotiation.
There's also reports, Congressman, I mean, you are a member of House Appropriations. There's reports out there that basically some of the House Republicans are splitting with the White House on how to avoid a shutdown, and that this really is going to end up being a CR.
Well, there will be a CR. I will guarantee you that. It's just how long that continuing resolution will be. As you know, Cheryl, we're still living under 2024 budget numbers. We are doing our work on the Appropriations Committee. We have 10 out of the 12 appropriations bills done out of committee. We're doing labor, health, and human services today, and then we'll focus on commerce, justice, and science after that. We'll get that done. 3 of them have been passed off the House floor, but we need time on the House floor to get these passed. And I think a short-term continuing resolution up to possibly Thanksgiving might be what we need to get it done.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I know that the Trump administration wants a 1-year. That's according to the report in Fox News this morning. Congressman Mark Alford, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time as always. We'll be right back, everybody.
Thank you.
A bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers making an official trip to China later this month for the first time since 2019. Washington Democrat Adam Smith is leading the charge. This comes a week after leaders of China, Russia, and North Korea met in Tiananmen Square to observe Beijing's massive military parade. I want to bring in Texas Congressman Lance Gooden. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, your reaction to these Democratic lawmakers deciding they want to go to China, especially after that display that we just saw?
It seems a little bit like a waste of time to me. I saw what you saw in the press about it. I'm on the committee. I wasn't invited. I wouldn't go if I was. I find it also very interesting that the chairman of the committee is not participating. So I suspect this will be like a typical tour of North Korea or name your similar country where nothing really gets accomplished, and it's probably more of a win for the home country than it is for America.
So this is going to make China look good. This is going to make Xi Jinping get more, social media kudos, right?
I suspect if there's something to exploit, they'll exploit it quite well, as they always do.
Absolutely. And that is why, that display we saw with, with Putin and the limousines and Kim Jong-un and then Narendra Modi in there was just, I thought was egregious and just a veiled attack on the U.S. From a social media perspective anyway. So we'll see what this trip brings forth. The Department of Justice did announce federal charges against a Carlos DeJuan Brown Jr. We were just talking about this, Congressman. This is that deadly Charlotte train stabbing of Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska. Now, AG Pam Bondi is vowing to seek the maximum penalty. FBI Director Kash Patel says federal action is needed to stop repeat offenders. President Trump says he's sending federal help now to another struggling city with regards to crime. Listen to this.
We're going to be announcing another city that we're going to very shortly. We're working it out. The governor of a certain state would love us to be there, and the mayor of a certain city in that same state would love us to be there. We'll announce it probably tomorrow, and it's going to be something where we'll do like we did here.
The governor of a certain state would welcome it. Louisiana, Congressman, what do you think?
I think it's Louisiana. The only thing I'm not so sure of is whether or not the mayor of that certain city, New Orleans, would like having them there. But it's not going to be up to her. And I'm so happy to hear about this. New Orleans is a great city that has really been run down with these Democrat policies that are pro-crime. They're soft on crime. And Governor Jeff Landry in Louisiana is working closely with President Trump, and I do believe we'll be very pleased with what happens after this. And I hope it's a model for some of these other cities who have mayors that are perhaps too proud to admit they have a problem. As you said earlier on your program, you've got Karen Bass in California who stands up for the illegals and the criminals before the citizens while her city goes down the drain. The same is the case in Chicago, and soon to be even worse in places like New York. So I don't understand, if the federal government is willing to send help, why you wouldn't accept it. We have seen it work here in Washington, and the local mayor here, yes, she has taken some hits from her far left Democrat colleagues and supporters around the nation. But if you really got her honest, she would say that the city is a better place, and she's grateful to President Trump for it.
No, and Ashley Davis was with me, and she was saying the same thing about Washington, and it's just, things are just better. And by the way, that soundbite from President Trump, he went out to dinner in Washington, D.C., about a block from the White House, to show how nice D.C. can be when it's not got, criminals running all over the place and carjackings left and right.
Yeah. I wasn't afraid to walk last night and looking over my shoulder like I normally am here. So it's been really nice, and I hope it keeps up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Ashley and I both want to talk to you about this next topic, because obviously the government shutdown is looming. We've got 8 legislative days to go to avoid any government shutdown. So the White House is now asking Congress to extend the deadline to January 31st. That's 4 months. Now, this is on the heels of a 21-page list of funding anomalies detailing programs the administration says need different spending levels in the upcoming stopgap bill. Congressman, what can you tell us?
Well, I found out about this late last night. Some of my colleagues had not even heard that the White House was proposing January 31st. You've got appropriators who feel as if this process has been taken away from them with these continuing resolutions that keep coming. But when I hear folks say we need less time, we need a continuing resolution that ends in Thanksgiving or Christmas because we need more time to negotiate, I have seen these folks try to negotiate for so long and come up with nothing that I'm not so sure that more time is what they need. I think they need leadership. And unfortunately, since I've been in Congress, I have found that the best leadership comes from the White House when Donald Trump is president. And so I think you'll see him get more involved in the coming days. But I do believe that Democrats are going to have to step up and negotiate. They're saying crazy things, like we're going to need to roll back some of these presidential policies that they hate. There's just no scenario where we're going to do that. There's no scenario where the American people want to go back to the policies where the borders are open and their streets are even less safe than they are today. And so I think that you'll see this Congress come together in the coming weeks. Democrats will probably kick and scream and not be happy with the final product. But at the end of the day, I don't believe our government will shut down, and President Trump will lead us continuing into prosperity and safety and security.
Well, they've got their own agenda. Ashley Davis is with me. Ashley, go ahead.
Well, Lance, you know as well as I do. First of all, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
I wish I was in D.C. with you at the moment. But so this is what I'm hearing. And what do you think? November 20th, clean CR, which is what Thune's asking for. No anomalies because of all the ACA Obamacare subsidies that are expiring. So that's what I'm hearing is the sticking point, which is why maybe we do it right before Thanksgiving. But I agree with you. I'm too jaded about this whole process. It's a disaster.
Yeah. Well, no member of Congress wants to be here over Thanksgiving or Christmas, frankly.
Or we don't either.
Especially if it's something that could be taken care of now. And so I don't know. I think the appropriators, we may perhaps pass a portion of the appropriations bills in the coming weeks. We'll see how, and I say weeks, I mean days. In the next week, we'll see how it turns out. But I could see a scenario if we got to January 31 where we potentially have this passed as early as next week, but that's ambitious.
Real quick before you go, Congressman, so I was looking at the list of anomalies, and there's one request is a D.C. fix, which allows D.C. to spend over $1 billion of its locally raised tax revenue. Another is higher funding for SNAP nutrition assistance programs.
Yeah, you know, the White House is not out of touch with the American people, contrary to what Democrats say. The president absolutely wants needy families who are deserving of aid to have that. The president realizes that perhaps there are issues that need more funding and that need more attention, which is why I think you'll see a very positive response to some of the things that he's proposing. It's very difficult for Democrats to criticize the president for wanting to increase SNAP funding, for wanting to increase funding for D.C. I have a hard time believing that the mayor of D.C. is going to get out there and be critical of this ask that helps her city.
Absolutely. And she's definitely changed her tune. We'll leave it there. Congressman Lance Gooden, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
All right, buckle up. Tariffs are on the fast track to the Supreme Court, and the economic stakes couldn't be higher. Welcome to the Big Money Show. I'm Brian Brenberg, along with my co-host Charles Payne, Dagan McDowell, Jackie DeAngelis, and with us for the hour, Slate Stone Wealth Chief Market Strategist Kenny Polcari. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the Supreme Court is moving quickly to determine whether the White House has the power to impose those sweeping tariffs. The justices want the case decided by the end of the year. Critics say the tariffs are executive overreach, but the administration says we're nearing a dangerous tipping point.
I'm confident the Supreme Court's going to go with us. As you and I know, in economics and markets, there's something called a tipping point. And my judgment, that as someone who's taught economic history, is that we were very close to the tipping point, and the emergency nature of it is we're close to the waterfall, and President Trump has taken us away from the edge.
Charles, you're a guy who I know studies economic history. I think it's interesting that Scott Bessent's talking about this tipping point.
Yeah.
And he's doing it because he's talking about the stakes of the tariffs being repealed. Basically, the Supreme Court saying you can't do this. Do you think we're as close to a tipping point? And what is the tipping point if we are near one?
Well, we're not as close as we were. I mean, we saw, and I think, the whole thing is just absolutely phenomenal in my mind in the sense that the inflation that was expected, hasn't materialized. I don't think it will materialize. And I was probably one of the most, I was out there stronger than almost anyone back in May and April when that was the consensus on Wall Street. Although reading Smoot-Hawley and studying it is not that hard. You can see it was deflation. That's a different argument. The tipping point, in my mind, is the ability to bring, I think this was our last chance, to try to bring back manufacturing to this country, to rebuild our industrial base. Because think about, there's a gap there, right? You hear people say, well, I don't see it. Even now you say, well, we don't see it in the manufacturing data or the construction data. It takes a certain amount of time and a certain amount of investment. It also may take a little bit of a sacrifice from corporations, corporate America. Here's what I say to corporate America. For decades, your profit margin was between 6 and 8%. After 2009, it went to 16%, and now it's around 14%. You're making more money than you've ever made before. This is called an investment. This is called an investment into your key constituents, right? And if we don't make it now, I fear that we would never be able to make it. That it was the public pushback against this. Oh man, my Beanie Baby cost a little bit extra money, whatever the hell it is. You know what I mean? That even on a temporary basis.
Nowadays, I think is what.
Oh, let me tell you, that stock's up 400% though. But don't get me started. I wish they traded.
Stay focused.
It's on a Hong Kong market. Don't get me started. My granddaughter hit me to that. But the point is, though, we want to get those dolls made in this country too, if we can. But seriously, we were at a tipping point, and some of you can even argue maybe we went past the tipping point, because it's still going to be an uphill battle to get those things done. Now, in the meantime, think about the bond market's reaction. The bond market wants those tariffs to stay in place. All right. Think about the stock market reaction. When this, I won't call it an activist judge, but when the judge said, okay, these are unconstitutional, the stock market crashed. If they said that back in April, the stock market would have exploded to the upside. So everyone's become used to this. The trillions of dollars and that will go against the deficit over the next 10 years if they stay in place, bringing back the industrial base, bringing back jobs. We desperately need this as a source of a foundational source for our economy. Not now. You can't measure it now, but measure it over the next 2, 3, 4 years.
Right. Dagan, I heard a couple things in there that I thought might pique your interest. Bond yields, what's the bond market telling us? Trillions in revenue, whether it goes against the deficit or not, we shall see. But I know you've been hot on both of those. What do you make of this?
It's kind of surprising that the Supreme Court is acting so quickly on this, is moving so rapidly, given the fact that you had not one but two courts rule in the other direction. I talked to Lydia Hu for a long time about this early this morning. But if the Supreme Court overturns the president's ability to implement these tariffs, two things are going to happen. Longer-term interest rates, Treasury rates, will go up dramatically, and the slowing in inflation will reverse. Because, as Charles was pointing out, and we saw it in the wholesale prices this morning, and I said this day one, tariffs are not inflationary. They actually slow growth and have slowed inflation coming, that we import into this country. But the reason that longer-term interest rates would go up, I will just go to a headline recently. Trump tariff revenue helps U.S. keep AA+ rating with S&P. That was in August. We're looking at bare minimum. Right now, it's about a little more than $180 billion in tariff revenue so far this year, fiscal year, roughly. That's more, I keep saying this, but that is more than Congress, the Republicans, cut in spending in the One Big Beautiful Bill. We're running, on average, more than $100 billion per month in just interest on the national debt. That's $400 billion, roughly, in tariff revenue, which is where we're going to be running, is 4 months of interest on the national debt. Or so far this year, we have brought in more revenue, and it's tax revenue. It is a consumption tax on Americans who probably don't pay any income tax in this country. So it's more than Congress offset with spending cuts. We need that revenue desperately. And so it's up to Congress. Do you like the tax revenue that's coming into the federal fisc? Do you need it? If you don't need it, then you do need it, but you should then step up and cut spending commensurately with what goes away in revenue if that's the way the Supreme Court decides.
I really wish they would cut spending. I don't think they are, Jackie.
No. Well, then they might be forced to, because if longer-term interest rates go up, guess what also goes up? Your borrowing cost and your interest expense. It could be not great for the economy.
It's true. The legality of it, Jackie, I mean, you go wherever you want to. I'm just saying, as a matter of my non-legal analysis, I think that the odds are good the Supreme Court's going to uphold the appeals court decision, and they're going to strike down at least some portion of the president's tariffs. I don't know where you land on that, but I also wonder then, what does it mean? What are the implications of that? All those issues on the table. Go.
Well, sometimes some of the justices go rogue, so I don't want to make a prediction. I know the administration is saying they think the Supreme Court is going to rule in their favor. I thought you made an excellent point the other day on the back of something that Dagan has always said, which is the Democrats are in favor of tariffs. They'd like to be able to exercise and use these powers later on. So maybe you get the liberal justices actually oddly on board with this.
I think it's very possible that's who carries it if the Supreme Court goes with Trump. It could be the liberal justices.
And so I'm not going to try to game it in that way. The way I approach this is to ask myself, what is it exactly the Supreme Court's going to try to decide on? They're going to try to decide two questions. Is this a national emergency or a tipping point, as you guys have been discussing? And also, is this the right application of the law? So I think you made a case for, where we are with respect to the tipping point. Peter Navarro, the trade team, they're all saying that trade deficits are in such dire shape that this is a national emergency, and hence this law definitely applies. Then I look back to some of the precedent. He created the case a little bit for some precedent using this act in his previous administration to implement some of his tariffs, although they were at a lesser scale. And I think the big question then becomes, and I'm trying to synthesize so many things that we've talked about at different times together in this timeline. Dagan's brought up the idea of, are these tariffs permanent or not? If they're being used as an emergency situation to stem a crisis, the court might look at it differently versus the implications of whether they're permanent. Now, the administration has said many times, we never said they're permanent, and they didn't say they're permanent, but the market's assuming that they're permanent and that they are going to stay here. This is really a case about Trump versus small business, his policy that he implemented in these small businesses that have, brought this case saying, this is a tax, this put me out of business. This isn't sustainable, and it's only going to get worse. And so they've got to synthesize all of that and come up with a ruling.
Yesterday, the NFIB, the largest organization for small businesses in this country, inflation worries are free-falling. Prices have come down. Right. That's what they had to say yesterday. Right. So you're always going to find individual companies, particularly those who over-rely on China, for instance. But the organization itself, that inflation number, which spiked in 2022, has come down rapidly in the face of all of this, which is interesting.
Inflation isn't the worry for them. They're laying off people, bankruptcies among, say, farmers and fishermen on the rise, among trucking companies. So they're not worried about inflation. They're worried about going under.
Right. And I think that's the central issue. I just want to say this about how they're expediting it. I do think that they realize that the markets, the administration needs to know what its next moves are going to be, and that this is an important case to fast track. They've got a deadline for filings to be submitted of September 19th, oral arguments early November. They want to have a decision by the end of the year, and I do think that that's smart for everybody involved.
Kenny, Charles said something interesting. He said that markets are now expecting the tariffs to stay. They want the tariffs to stay. Is that how you read it?
I do. I do read it that way. I think, and the longer this drags on, the more tariffs is going to be, the more benefit it's going to be, which actually has, that's a double-sided sword, because if the Supreme Court then says they're illegal, that's just a larger amount that ends up having to get paid back. And so Dagan's point, think about what happens in the bond market, because we'll have to go to the bond market to raise that money. So supply will explode, prices will decline, and yields will shoot higher.
The Treasury market, to Charles's point, longer-term treasuries, it is not telling you that these tariffs are getting overturned.
Right.
Because the 10-year is at 4.04 right now.
That's the 30-year has come down dramatically.
4.7, I think. 7.3 or something, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I suspect investors are going to be watching the Supreme Court very closely come November in argument.
All right, I have to interrupt here right away. President Trump has just posted on Truth Social that Charlie Kirk is dead. I'll give you the quote from Mr. Trump: "The great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead. No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all, especially me, and now he is no longer with us. Melania and my sympathies go out to his beautiful wife, Erica, and family. Charlie, we love you." I will just echo that. We will pray for him in another life.
The FBI is investigating a bombshell report that claims Chinese hackers pretended to be top U.S. lawmaker John Molnar during trade talks last July. A series of emails were sent seeking insight on negotiations from top law firms, trade groups, and federal agencies. The Wall Street Journal calling it the latest in a series of alleged cyber espionage campaigns linked to Beijing, timed to potentially deploy spyware against organizations giving input on President Trump's trade negotiations. Trade talks between Washington and Beijing are slow going. The Journal reporting China's latest negotiation tactic: keep talking, give no ground. But Beijing's still feeling the pressure of the tariffs on trans-shipments through China. Exports to the U.S. plunged 33% for August. Overall growth slowed to its weakest in 6 months. Joining us now is Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, your reaction to all of this?
Well, I think the most important thing is that we don't have those trade talks moving forward. And I think the reason is because of political turmoil in Beijing. When Xi Jinping's future is uncertain, nobody in the Chinese capital, especially Xi himself, feels safe in making concessions. So I don't think there's going to be any clarity after two things happen. One of them is that next month, the Communist Party Central Committee holds its fourth plenum, and people think that one way or another, Xi's future is going to be clarified. The other thing is at the end of October, you have the APEC meeting in in South Korea, and there Trump and Xi Jinping might actually sit down on the sidelines of the meeting. There might be some clarity after that, but still, I think that Xi Jinping is going to tough this out.
Interesting that you say that, Liz.
Well, yeah, I think that the question is, after that incredible show of force and might, having Narendra Modi and the Russians and everybody, I mean, Xi seems very powerful. Are you suggesting that possibly at the plenum next month he might be deposed?
Or sidelined, or have his wings clipped? That's entirely possible.
And that would be shocking, wouldn't it?
It would be it'd be stunning. I mean, but right now we know that there is instability at the top of the regime, especially at the top of the military, where Xi Jinping's loyalists are being disappeared, and the rumors are that some of them have been actually executed. We don't know, but there are objective factors that suggest Xi Jinping has lost substantial influence in the military. On the civilian side, the evidence is not so clear. But, you know, this has been something that people have been talking about for quite some time. Maria has been actually on this now for about 8 or 9 months. So there's something going on there.
You have been talking about it for a long time, that there is this instability. I mean, but to have it actually come to a head, would be pretty remarkable.
What would be remarkable, Liz, is that after all of Xi Jinping's failures over the course of a decade, that nothing happens.
Yeah, you know, there's that.
Well, and I think, by the way, just pivoting back to something that Liz brought up, though, is it, you know, that axis of evil show that we got between Modi and Xi and Putin, and then obviously Kim Jong-un, factor in North Korea into this. I mean, this is, despite the sanctions on Russia, despite the trade negotiations, the tariffs on China, these leaders seem to be thumbing their nose at the United States. That's got to be infuriating for the administration right now, especially what they saw last week.
Yeah, but this axis has been in place for a very long time, and it's just we Americans have refused to acknowledge it. But certainly Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, they see the world in the same terms, and they've been coordinating their policies for more than a decade. So, yeah, I mean, what we saw was a demonstration of it, but this has been going on a long time. But also, the other thing about Wednesday's big military parade, I think the Chinese are boasting about weapons that they may not have, because we have seen in the last 3 to 4 weeks, there's been an unprecedented propaganda from Communist Party and central government media outlets about how good their weapons are. I just think they're boasting a little bit too much right now, so I'm suspicious about how good this stuff is, because if it was really good, they wouldn't be telling us all the details that we've learned over the last month.
Meanwhile, they've been slow rolling the critical minerals that we need for our defense industry, which we've talked about. I want to ask you about this too, because China's been boosting. This is a report boosting LNG trade with Russia.
Right.
Another test for the Trump administration. The president's been vocal about frustrations with Russia and India for getting so close to Beijing, especially after that huge, military parade that you just mentioned. But at the same time, that the president wrote on Truth Social, looks like we've lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China. May they have a long and prosperous future together. What did you make about that comment from President Trump? And by the way, just watch this real quick.
Mr. President, who do you blame for losing India to China? In your post earlier today in the morning, you did put that out.
I don't think we have. I've been very disappointed that India would be buying so much oil, as you know, from Russia. And I let them know that. We put a very big tariff on India, 50% tariff, very high tariff. I get along very well with Modi, as you know. He's great. He was here a couple of months ago.
What do you make of all of that, especially that post and then those comments from President Trump? What's happening here, in your opinion?
Well, I think President Trump walked that back a little bit, and he should, because we haven't lost India to China. Remember, Modi, although he did go to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting in Tianjin, he did not go to the parade. And that was a message to China and to the world that he did not want to be part of this anti-Western group that China and Russia, North Korea, and Iran are forming. But Modi has a point. I mean, he says, look, we're really unhappy with the 25% tariff that the United States imposed on India for buying Russian oil. He said it was unjustified. No, it was not unjustified. That tariff was a good thing for President Trump to do. But Modi has a point when he said it was unfair, because we did not also impose the 25% tariff on China, and China's been buying more Russian oil than India has. As a matter of fact, India, after that tariff, has scaled back Russian purchases while China's taken up the slack. So Trump needs to do something about China really quick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gordon Chang, it's always great to see you. Thank you for joining us on Set Today.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah.
Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert called for prayer on the House floor last night. All right, listen to the Democrats' response. Senator Rand Paul joins me now. What's your response to your colleagues in the House, Senator?
Well, I think today is a day of mourning. I knew Charlie well. My wife Kelly knew him well. We spoke at his conferences. Actually, I've been to college conferences at University of New Hampshire where we spoke. We did the question and answer, and he loved to engage with the crowd. And today's just a sad day, and I want to stay away from anything about politics other than to remember a great young man, an extraordinary man. And, you know, as I was remembering him last night and looking through his various debates, I came across his debate at Oxford, and just unparalleled. And it makes me, you know, just try to remember that Charlie, that people will remember, that was an extraordinary debater, extraordinary presenter, but also a motivator. You'd go to the rallies, and they're like pep rallies. A lot of them were high school kids, college kids. I visited his headquarters in Phoenix. You go into a big open room where everybody's working in the same room, 200 kids in college and high school all doing the work for him, all excited about, you know, small government, God-given rights. Just an amazing man, and we will miss him.
Senator, President Trump is blaming the radical left. Watch this.
Violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now.
Senator, how do you address the rising tide of political violence?
You know, I saw some of the man or woman on the street interviews last night from a college campus of people thinking that the violence was just fine. And that's really disturbing. I mean, the idea that people would casually say, oh, that they were just fine with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And that is just so appalling. I think in some ways the internet has bred this because people think they can react with anonymity, but they also think, and they get so over the top with their anger, and they don't realize, and people should realize this, in Washington, I have civil conversations every day with Republicans and Democrats, and we have disagreements. But the idea that disagreements have to end in violence is crazy. I hope they catch the killer, and the killer should be punished, and the killer needs to be caught also to protect other people. Right. But, you know, I think the sooner the better, and I hope that this will happen today, maybe.
Senator, thank you very much for being with us today on an important day.
Thank you.
Always appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
This ruling is not the final word. President Trump is appealing a federal judge's order to block him from firing Fed Governor Lisa Cook. White House spokesperson telling Fox News Digital, quote, the president lawfully removed Lisa Cook for cause due to credible allegations of mortgage fraud from her highly sensitive position overseeing financial institutions on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. I'm not going to ask you, Kennedy, about monetary policy, but just put us in the room next week when the FOMC is meeting and Lisa is there, knowing that, well, you shouldn't be there.
No, she actually was appointed because of Kamala Harris, who cast the tie-breaking vote in the Senate. She obviously didn't have any confidence from Senate Republicans who saw her as a far-left activist. Why can't you fire someone on the Board of Governors? Why is that? You know, and the rationale, at least from the circuit court judge, was, well, you shouldn't be able to fire something for something they did before they were appointed to their task. It's like, well, what if they had a computer full of child pornography? Like, there seem to be some actionable things. Yeah. And, you know, she's being accused of mortgage fraud. It is now a criminal referral, and you can get up to 30 years in prison for that. So if it is that easy, and she's got a PhD, you know, she went all the way. Yeah. And then taught at Michigan State. I think she was a Spartan.
That's right.
Yeah.
A Spartan.
Yeah, as a professor.
Not Spartan with her accommodations, though. She had lots of houses. Not Spartan there.
Yes, she did. 3 of them at least.
At least.
She's like the Bernie Sanders of ultra-left Fed governors.
She's a real estate hoarder. She's part of the problem, lying on her mortgage documents and then hoarding real estate that other people could buy.
If you see yourself as having a political career and a path to the Fed, you better make damn sure that all those T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And it seems like she was doing the opposite. And there might have been some chicanery, some fraudulent chicanery on those mortgage forms.
So mortgage fraud is a very big deal. It's not like, oh, I got a parking ticket the other day, I got to remember to pay it. No, it's a huge big deal. And if you are a member of the Federal Reserve Board, this should be exactly what you are not doing. I don't care if it happened 5 years ago or 20 years ago. Like, why didn't we know this before? So you talk to people in financial markets about this, they are aghast that this would happen. They're like, how is this possible? She is a regulator on the very industry who gave her these mortgages. I'm going to stop right now because I just get wound up. But you can't do that.
Maybe if we end the Fed, Jerry would feel better.
That's your monetary policy. I know that.
It's so much worse than you're talking about, because the law says the president, the executive, can fire someone in the executive branch for cause. And now you have a district court judge determining what the cause can and cannot be. I'm sorry, this is a total banana republic activist judge. Okay, President Trump will win on this, on the appeal, absolutely. Right? How on earth can you have these district judges second-guessing the judgment of the president? He did not violate the law. You're saying, oh, because this alleged cause happened before? Who are you to make this judgment? And they say Trump breaks norms. This is case 1,175 of the D.C. establishment just saying, to the hell with everything. I'm just going to do this to stick it to the man.
Well, you know, it's one thing we learned through all of these past 6 months is the bureaucracy has done a great job of putting themselves in a spot where you can't fire them. Like every agency the president wants to go into and fire somebody, they can't. It goes to court. I mean, I don't know how many of these things are fighting in court right now. They have totally insulated themselves from accountability. And that I think is what people see in this case. The left or the financial media want to make it about the independence of the Fed, but I think most honest people actually see there's a bigger issue, and the Fed is a piece of it, and that issue is accountability. Yeah. This like shadow government gets itself into jobs, and they've made it so that nobody can ever take them out of those jobs. And now the president's saying we're going to fight that all the way to the Supreme Court. And now the Supreme Court's going to have to make a decision about whether a criminal referral on mortgage fraud is grounds for being fired. And I think the chances are good they're going to say it is, because it's actually commonsensical to anybody who wants to look at the issue.
You know, I hope they don't. I hope they just say the president decides the cause. The courts don't decide what the cause is. The president, the executive, the leader of the executive branch can fire someone for cause in the executive branch. The CEO gets to decide what the cause is, not some court. Right? Because as soon as it becomes a court, it becomes the law then, is determined by the judge on the day in whichever way the wind is blowing and like who that judge is. It doesn't work that way.
Mike, it was a clerical error, okay? It was just, it was a clerical error.
It can't be, because she's applying for 2 mortgages simultaneously. Right? And you do this because you have to put down less money and you get a lower interest rate, which magnifies the rate of return you get by investing in these homes. And if you're making this clerical error, you are not fit to sit on the Fed board.
And it was 3 properties. The first 2, she had 2 primary residences, and then the condo or the apartment in Cambridge was a second home that she was using as an investment property. And her legal team came out and said that the Biden administration knew about these problems when they nominated her to the Fed board. That does not absolve you from occupancy
I wonder how
fraud.
she got the nomination. That's weird. It's probably because she studied at Berkeley. That's, it's probably what it was.
A very renowned institution for sound economic thinking.
Yes, she is an economic genius, because she can't fill out more.
Just not
documents.
clerically
inclined.
Right. There's disclaimers under those boxes too.
They rake you over the coals when you file those mortgage documents, because it's like, you don't work in Atlanta. How is that possibly your primary residence? Wait, where do you live? Again, it's just insanity.
As we said, dramatic news from the president. Appearing on Fox, he said, with a high degree of certainty, we got him. The suspect in Charlie Kirk's assassination is in custody. What else do we have?
FBI worked with local police over the past 2.5 days, and the president broke the news about what they found last hour on Fox and Friends.
With a high degree of certainty, we have him. Somebody that was very close to him turned him in. The father convinced the son, this is it. A minister who is involved with law enforcement. His good friend is a top U.S. Marshal, and they took it from there. And then it was a father got involved, namely his father, and said, we got to go in. We have the person that we think is the person we're looking for. But they drove into the police headquarters, and he's there now.
Yeah, his name has not been released. Sources tell Fox the individual was walked in late last night in Utah. There will be a press conference momentarily. We will bring that to you. The FBI also said they received 7,000 tips from the public, helping them find the shooter after they released what you're looking at. Photos and surveillance video of the suspect darting across a rooftop on campus. At one point, he jumps to the ground and walks past a parking lot. Utah Governor Spencer Cox says the state is preparing to pursue the death penalty. Vice President J.D. Vance helped carry Kirk's casket on Air Force Two yesterday. Look at that. It is now back in Phoenix, where Kirk lived and where his company, Turning Point, was based. The president, of course, attending the funeral next week.
Lauren, thanks very much indeed. Todd Pyro with me this morning. Good news indeed. A suspect in custody.
Absolutely. And we got the sense, based upon interviews that we had been doing, that this was about to happen. There was an indication from former FBI officials and the like that they said, based upon everything that they had seen and based upon how their investigations had gone when they were in the line of service, they said it was going to be about 24 hours, and here we have it.
And now we've got to know this person's motivation. What made him do this, and was he connected to anybody else? That's paramount importance.
And that is why it's so important that he is alive, because so oftentimes in these situations, the shooter dies, either kills themselves or goes out in a blaze of glory. It's crucial that we have him or her alive so we can find out those crucial details that you just mentioned.
I'm pretty sure it's a man by the looks of the photographs. Look, I don't know. I shouldn't even ask the question. But where to from? Now, the president this morning said, look, he wants a speedy trial and he wants an execution. That's pretty strong stuff. He wants to just get on with it.
Extremely strong stuff. And look, with regard to the execution, you did hear the governor of Utah say that was on the table. In terms of speed, let me give you a little inside baseball into the judicial system. They can move fast if they want to. OK, and so if the powers that be are all pushing this to move fast, it will move faster.
Well, I'm aware of the fact that it's 24 years since 9/11. The mastermind behind it is still in prison, and he's not been tried. Now, you can't have that kind of gap in that kind of situation. You can't have that follow through to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. You can't do that. It's got to get on with it.
Well, the argument there, of course, one of the many arguments as to why they needed to keep that individual alive was intelligence gathering. And now, of course, there are geopolitical factors involved with those individuals. So I think this shooter is a much different situation, and I think it can and will be speedy.
OK. Todd, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.